The Insights Idaho Department of Finance communicates department news and perspectives to aid consumers in making educated financial decisions and to inform both industry and consumers of regulatory and consumer protection issues.
Hello, welcome to the 12th episode of Insights. I am Kellie Davis, the program specialist with the Idaho Department of Finance. Today, I am sitting down with one of IDOF's expert examiners to learn more about debt settlement and credit repair companies. Today's guest is Jamie Fields. Jamie is a financial examiner / investigator 3 with the Idaho Department of Finance. Her role is in the Consumer Finance Bureau under the Debt Services Program. She is quite the expert when it comes to collections. Thank you for joining me, Jamie. I am looking forward to learning more about these companies and getting your expert insight on the topic. To kick things off, can you talk about your role at the department and how long you've been an examiner? Feel free to share anything else that you think is relevant.
Hi, Kelly. Thank you for having me on today. I have been a collections examiner with the department for over 4 years. Collection agencies are required to be licensed in Idaho, so I review license applications, amendments, and annual license renewal documents. And I also do examinations on collection agencies under the Idaho Collection Agency Act. During an examination, we review a company's compliance program and other documents, policies, and procedures. I also participate in multi-state examinations with a handful of other states. The type of companies that need to be licensed in Idaho include collection agencies, debt buyers, debt settlement companies, and credit repair companies.
Wow, that is awesome. Thank you so much for sharing that, Jamie. Let's dive into the topic at hand. For those that are unfamiliar with debt settlement and credit repair companies, could you provide just a brief overview of their purposes and services?
Yes. Debt settlement companies are those that offer to pay a consumer's debts with lump sum payments that the consumer must save up before a settlement is made. They may also state they can renegotiate or lower a consumer's interest rates on their debts. These are just for unsecured debts. So debts such as credit card debts, medical bills, tax debts, or personal loan. Debt settlement does not apply to secured debt like a mortgage or an auto loan. And then credit repair companies offer services to help consumers address negative items on their credit reports by disputing inaccurate information with consumer reporting agencies, including Equifax, Experian, and TransUnion.
Are there any kind of specific consumers that you see using these companies more frequently?
Yes, consumers who may have entered a financial hardship or consumers who may be looking to lower their interest rates and consolidate their unsecured debts into one payment may seek out a debt settlement company. And then for credit repair, those types of companies would appeal to consumers who are looking to improve their credit scores or want to dispute items on their credit score or on their credit report.
Since we're in the state of Idaho, have you seen any kind of trends with these companies in Idaho?
We don't currently have any specific trends in Idaho, as companies are not required to have a brick and mortar in Idaho to do business here. They do have to be licensed with the department to do business with Idaho consumers, but it's not an industry that's big here in Idaho. So any trends that we're seeing are the same that we're seeing everywhere.
So, now that we have a better understanding of what debt settlement and credit repair companies do, what key considerations would you highlight for consumers thinking about utilizing these services?
So, consumers may look at some of the pros for a debt settlement company. If a consumer's credit is already damaged and they want to avoid bankruptcy, and if a creditor does accept a settlement, they could end up paying less and they could end up paying their debt off in a shorter period of time. But with debt settlement companies, there are a list of potential pitfalls. With credit repair, it could benefit a consumer if they don't want to do the work themselves as far as disputing items on their credit report, or if they know for sure there are inaccuracies on their credit report that they could pay a credit repair company to dispute on their behalf and have removed. So as far as the pitfalls with debt settlement, these companies typically enroll delinquent debt into the programs. So if you have current debt that has not gone delinquent yet, they may encourage you to stop making payments, which could affect your credit score. It could mean that your debt still gets sent to collections, and that could also lead to you still being sued by a creditor. or a collection agency. Consumers may still incur late fees. Some creditors may not work with debt settlement companies. Typically, when we see or examine a debt settlement company, they know who those creditors are, and they kind of say, we don't even try to contact XYZ because we know they won't work with us. So the consumer may not be able to reduce or eliminate all of their unsecured debts. Consumers may be able to do this work on their own and negotiate lower interest rates with their creditors without the help of a debt settlement company. They can do that just by contacting their creditors themselves directly. And then another thing to look out for is that third-party accounts are used for settlement payments. So a debt settlement company will set up it's called a designated trust account, and that's where your payments will go before they are remitted to your creditor. Those accounts are run by a third party, and they can incur their own service charges. So those fees could be on top of the fees that the debt settlement company will end up charging you as well. So they could have different monthly fees. They could have fees if you make a withdrawal out of that account, if you add a creditor or remove a creditor. There are different charges that you just need to be aware of as a consumer that go along with those designated special accounts.
And on the end of credit repair companies, do you see any pitfalls with that?
Yes, we do sometimes see where they may dispute negative information from a consumer's credit report, but it is accurate information. That information cannot legally be removed off a credit report if it is accurate. Consumers, as with debt settlement, consumers can also dispute inaccurate information on their credit reports for free, and that is also something they can do themselves. They also should be aware of being charged what's called a monthly subscription fee by a credit repair company. If the services were solicited through telemarketing, a credit repair company has to comply with the telemarketing sales rule. So that's just another regulation for consumers to be aware of.
On that topic, are there any questionable things that consumers should be watching out for when it comes to debt settlement and credit repair companies?
Yes, we would encourage consumers to Google the companies, review the Google complaints. If there are an excessive amount of complaints on Google or the Better Business Bureau, I would caution doing business with that type of a company. If there are excessive amounts of positive testimonials, that might be a company that is too good to be true. And then I know in the next section we'll talk about some more red flags and look into more of like non-compliance as far as regulations.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Those were some really great points, and it is really important for consumers to understand these services before getting involved with them for sure. So to start wrapping up this conversation, I'd love to hear about the department roles with regulating these services. So as a primary regulator of these companies, how does the Department of Finance oversee and enforce regulations for these companies in Idaho?
We license them, we do examinations, and we also review complaints for these two types of companies. And during those reviews, we look to see if the companies are adhering to the Idaho Collection Agency Act and the Credit Repair Organization Act. Failure to comply with regulations, either state or federal, could lead to examination findings and administrative action taken by the department. So what we're looking for with the Idaho Collection Agency Act, which I'll call the ICAA from now on because it's easier to say, that requires licensure of credit repair companies and debt settlement companies. In that regulation, it does cap monthly fees. During our licensing review and our examination review, we review contracts and compliance procedures to make sure that there are nothing to be aware of or nothing that is out of compliance. We try to do examinations between 18 months and 5 years. And then we oversee complaints and request consumer contracts and documentation for review so we can see what types of fees the companies are charging. For debt settlement, they can only charge 20% of the consumer's monthly payment amount, but they can't start charging that amount until the consumer has actually made a payment to one of their creditors. So the debt settlement company has to have settled one of the debts, and it has to have made a payment on one of those debts before that 20% fee can be charged to the consumer. And then another regulation, as I mentioned, that we look at is the Credit Repair Organization Act, CROA. That one is more specific to credit repair organizations, so it has a more specific detail. We would recommend that consumers review that if they are considering going into business with one of these two types of companies. It does require that they establish a written contract with consumers for credit repair. That includes disclosures with a right to cancel with specific verbiage. It also prohibits any upfront fees from being charged. That means that for either a credit repair company or a debt settlement agency, they cannot charge any fees until the service has been provided. As I mentioned before, with debt settlement, that means that they can't charge a fee until a debt has actually been settled and a payment has been made. For a credit repair company, that would mean some type of service would have to be provided to the consumer. So some kind of analysis of their credit report has to be provided. The company has to have done something for the consumer before a fee can be charged. We would encourage, again, people to review CROA before doing business with a credit repair company because the Idaho Collection Agency Act is more limited and CROA has more specific verbiage on what it requires of these types of companies.
So I know we touched on this a little bit before, but I would like to go over the red flags for any non-compliant companies and kind of what the department is seeing regulation-wise. And if you could just touch on those red flags, that'd be great.
The biggest red flag is going to be any upfront fees that they're going to try to charge. If one of these two types of companies has any type of setup fee, that's definitely going to be out of compliance. If they're not licensed at all with the department, that's a red flag. If they are stating they can rapidly increase your credit score, I would consider that a red flag as well. Another thing that we look at is their Better Business Bureau complaints, if they are excessive, if they're not responding to those complaints, or again, if they have excessive Google complaints, those could also be red flags. But again, the biggest red flags for non-compliance are going to be your upfront fees. They say they can rapidly increase your credit score or not being licensed with the department. And consumers can check if they're licensed with the department by going to NMLS Consumer Access or by contacting us here at the department. We can look up the company.
I know you already touched on that we do take complaints. So just for consumers to be aware, you can file a complaint on our website at finance.idaho.gov. So if you're seeing any of these issues coming up with these companies, please make sure that you are reaching out to us. So this has been a really great discussion, and I really appreciate you taking the time to sit with us today. Gaining a clear understanding of debt settlement and credit repair companies is essential for consumers, particularly those exploring their options. Being informed empowers individuals to make sound financial decisions and navigate these services with confidence. Thank you again for sharing your expertise with us.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for tuning in to the 12th episode of Insights by IDOF. We appreciate the expert perspective on debt settlement and credit repair companies and hope our listeners gain valuable insights into how these companies operate and important factors to consider before engaging with them.
We want to thank you for joining us for our production of Insights, the Idaho Department of Finance. We'd love to hear from you and learn more about the ideas and topics that are on your mind. Forward your suggestions and feedback to our email address, finance@finance.idaho.gov.